Hudson, a marketing and business coach, and today I'm with my friend and colleague Sylvia Beloy, and we're going to talk about Sylvia's work as a transition coach. So Sylvia, give me a little bit of a background about you and the work that you do.
Hi Megan, this is Sylvia Beloy, the transition coach and industrial psychologist. I'm excited, that today we're talking about this topic which is closest to my heart. Transition is one of those things that everybody goes through it, but we never actually talk about it. So today I'm glad that we'll be talking about it. So I'm excited, to be spending time with you talking about this transition. Thank you.
Lovely. So transition is a journey. It's about moving from your comfort zone. And in an audiobook that you recently recorded, you speak about how we get stuck in our habits. But sometimes we actually get forced into a transition. And I know that you've got a personal story around that. So would you like to share it with us?
Yes, that's so interesting because people really go through transition every day. They don't even know that they're in transition. So there's the scary part of it. And it's only after we've done the intervention they realize, actually I was in transition. So for me, there's a couple of transitions that I've been through, so I'll talk to two of them which really are closest to my heart. The first one is the promotion. Promotion is a positive thing. And people, when they get promotion, you should be excited and happy. Yes, there is that. But there's also that anxiety that comes with that because you're thinking, sure, this new responsibility, will I live up to the expectations? And also because the people in the organization, they're expecting more from you. So it's that transition, moving from where you've been to the next level. So that for me has been the biggest transition that, when I was in corporate, because now I'm in my own consulting, so there's different transitions that I had to make later on in my career.
I really identify with that. In fact, moving up the corporate ladder and having to cope with the transition of more seniority is the reason why I first went into coaching. So tell me a little bit more about your transition from corporate life into becoming an entrepreneur.
Yes, that was a big transition. The first one was with a promotion, but this one moving from corporate to starting my own business, that was the biggest one. And at that time I was loving the corporate world. You move through the corporate ladder, you're doing so well, and I love the projects. Everything was going my way. And suddenly, one day it just happened. Went to work in the morning, and then when I came back, I didn't have a job.
Sure.
So it was retrenchment. And unfortunately, I've been on the other side where I was dealing with retrenchment, representing the business. And then now I had to deal with it myself. Being affected. So it's a totally different ballgame. Because at that time, when you're representing the business, you're focusing on the systems and processes. And now when you're there, you're realizing, now it's a human being. It's a real person going through those challenges. So for me, that was my biggest transition. Yes.
And I think it's so topical at the moment with the pandemic, where so many people, companies have been forced to downsize and so many people have lost their jobs recently. So you really are in a very good position to be able to personally identify with people going through that transition, a forced transition, and to help them work their way through it because you've got both sides of the coin.
Yes, yeah, I've already started working with clients, who were retrenched from last year because, since the pandemic started from last year, people are losing their livelihood. And, it's not a simple thing that now, you can start your own business. Some people, they're not even business-minded, So for me, it's important to realize where people are at and enable them to shift to the next level. For some people, it could be getting another job, but for other people, it's starting their own businesses. So it's to find people where they are at and enable them to be able to transition effectively.
So we've spoken about a sort of forced transition now, with the pandemic and, people being forced to move into either becoming an entrepreneur or searching for another job. But there are other kinds of transition that are not so noticeable or forced, so to speak. How do you recognize signs that you might be going through transition or are on the verge of needing to go through a transition?
Yeah, most people struggle with that because they don't see it. It's only when they are in a bad space when they realize that I could have done something before. So the biggest thing, emotions, they give us so much information about ourselves. And at times, people brush off the emotions because you don't want to deal with it. I mean, if you have just lost your job, the last thing you want to sit with someone talking about how you lost your job and everything. And as a result, people tend to ignore it and they don't deal with it. And one day they will wake up and realize, this is so too much, this is overwhelming. They can't function. So that's when people come to to do the sessions. But we actually realize that people, when they come in a lot earlier, for example, with me, what I did during that period, it was towards the end of the year, so for two months or so, I did nothing. We always want the freedom of not having the responsibility of working and everything. So for that, it was a good period because it was towards the end of the year. So I didn't do a lot of things, and it gave me time to think and reflect. So that helped me a lot because by the time the new year started, I already had enough time, because you can't just forever stay and wallow in your pity. One day you have to wake up and say, you know what, I need to do something about the situation. So for me, that has been that. Then I realized at the time it was okay, to give myself time just to to deal with it, take it in, and then but to also decide that I can't live my life like this. I have to start doing some things. That's where it becomes difficult there, because you have to face the thing that you're running away from, because you don't want to deal with it because it's painful. So until you get to a stage where you have to face it and realize that this is what I'm facing, I have to deal with it, hard as it is, but with the support. That's why I also had to get a transition coach to help me in the journey. So for people who are going through that, it helps just to engage with a transition coach, because they enable you and allow you to go through those phases without feeling guilty or feeling I should have done this or done that. So that has been for me.
It strikes me as you are talking that transition is very much around, firstly, becoming aware. So getting in touch with what is going on for you, both internally and externally. Then acknowledging that you are going through a phase of transition, accepting that you need to go through a phase of transition. And I know that you have come up with 5 clever strategies for people to implement to help them go through transition. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yes, yeah. So it's exciting because, those are the steps that I came up with as I was going through my own transition. At the time, when you're going through it, you're not even thinking, okay, these are the steps. But I think now that I've been through that process, now I can come up with the steps that enable someone, quickly to just go through that process and make sure that they transition effectively. So they will have to go and check all of them on the audiobook, but I'll touch on a few of them. For the first one, like the vision. Sometimes when you find yourself, you've just been retrenched, you don't have a job. When somebody says, what's your vision? Like, what vision? But it's so important for one to get in touch with that, because there's things that you have always wanted to do, things that you didn't have time. Because I remember with myself, I've always wanted to start my own business. The business has been operating, but I wasn't active in it. But when that thing happened, then it was time for me to step in that, so that vision. So you need to keep that vision alive. And then the other thing is, people think, I have to start something new. No, start where you're at. What do you know? What do you know? What are your strengths? What are your developmental areas? Start where you're at. what are the things that you can turn around and use them, for your business. Most of the things that I'm using is things that I already, as the experience that I had. So it was just to enhance it and be able to share it with other people. And the biggest thing for me was surrounding yourself with people who support you. Because at times, the people that you may have journeyed with up to that point may not necessarily be the same people that will take you to the next level. So I think we need to recognize that. And some of the people, unfortunately, you have to cut the ties because you need somebody else to take you to the next level. So those were, are some of the tools that I think are effective. Some of the strategies that people need to be mindful of and implement them so that they can see change. And the last thing, as a bonus point, it's taking action, because most people don't take actions. People think situation changes by themselves. No, nothing changes. If you just sit, that's it. Nothing changed. Everything remains the same. The minute you decide, I am doing this, then you start and actually do it, because you can talk about it but not do it. So when you start doing it, that's where you see the difference.
And as you're talking, I realize that we've spoken a lot about transition in a corporate or business environment, but I'm also thinking about other transitions. For example, with the pandemic, there are people who are losing family members and are having to cope with a very heartbreaking and unwanted personal transition, and having to create a new vision of their lives without somebody special in their lives, somebody who's been central to their lives. If you look at things like divorce, the people have to create a new vision for what their life is going to be without the partner that they thought would be part of their lives, for the rest of their existence. And also, we see that divorce can be quite messy in terms of how the friends of the couple actually make choices and cope with divorce. So again, how you surround yourself with supportive people. Those are just two examples that came to mind of transitions in personal lives and where a transition coach like you can help.
Yes, no, that's so true, Megan. We have seen during this COVID, people lose loved ones, and on the one hand, people have already also started looking at their lives differently, because you lose a person closest to you. It actually forces you to look at your life, how you're living your life, and the opportunities that you have missed. I think for the most people, it's things that I could have, should have done with the other person. So I think with the transition coach, for some people we help them. For others, they also need counseling, because you'll find that there's deep-rooted issues that they have to deal with. So we also, there's counseling that is also provided, but coaching will help people, just to enable them to stand.
I think you've touched on something so important, that people get stuck with the should have, could have, didn't, all of that negative thought processes, and whether it's I could have been more effective in my job at work so that they didn't choose me, or whether it's I could have or should have prevented that person from being exposed, to a potential illness, whatever, or I could have, should have worked harder on my marriage. And it's so important to have somebody who can help you shift into a space of action.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, because people get stuck.
Yeah.
And they do absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And when you're stuck, you need a transition coach, to journey with you and to show you a different perspective. I've seen with most of my clients, actually it's just a shift in perspective that they needed. And then once they see that, they run by themselves. They do the actions that they put in place. They do them. And those who do the action is the one that you see the difference in them. But it's not an easy process. It's a difficult process. It's taxing on the individual. So that's why you can't do it by yourself. At times you're thinking, I can do it. You self-medicate, but here you can't. You self-medicate up to a point, then you realize I need to speak to someone who can just journey with me, enable me, to be effective.
So you've mentioned that you specialize in coaching. You also, because you're a qualified industrial and organizational psychologist, you're able to offer counseling. You've got a very high level of psychological literacy and knowledge, and I know that you are also accredited to offer a variety of different assessment tools. Can you tell us more about the place and space that they have in helping people to deal with transition?
Yes, the assessment plays a big role because it's about self-awareness. I think when everything is said and done, it's you as an individual who has to deal with the issues that are facing you. So if you understand yourself better, it enables you to shift, because then things that normally you will regard them as negative, you can actually use those things, the ones that are regarded as negative, turn them to your favor. So it's so important for people to realize their strength and their developmental areas, capitalize on their strength, and then work on their developmental areas. And for me, it's a lifelong journey. It never stops. You always discovering yourself. So that's part of that, how we use the assessment, and the results of the assessment you can also be used for as coaching agenda. For some of the coaches, because I do collaborate with other coaches as well. So where they are not certified to do the assessment, I do the assessment and then provide feedback. And then once the feedback is provided, then they can use the data, just as an agenda item.
Wonderful. So a very varied offering and a very holistic offering. Thank you so much, Sylvia. Just before we go, how can people contact you if they want to do so?
Yes, we have this audio book, Excited, so they must check chapter 4 of the audio book. Yeah, it talks about this. So we're so excited. And then we're also on various social media platforms. Our handle is @HR. So they can contact us, they can email us, and also, just check on our social media platforms and our website for more information. And we're excited that we're also launching this the training, the transition course. There's one where we're doing it for a month for just to give them tools and skills, but there's an intensive one, the 3-month one, for people that are really at a stage where they're saying, what, I'm not too sure if I'm transitioning, or I know I'm transitioning but I need assistance. So we're able to cater for for different people.
Thank you so much. We'll drop the links to all of your audiobook, to your website, your email address below this video. So if anybody wants to get in contact with you, they can do so really easily. This has been fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Megan, for talking to us. And we're really, excited. And I mean, I like the work that you're doing. And yeah, so the niche marketing, so that's the best work, because people need to be able to do that in their businesses. So I like the collaborations. We always collaborate on these big projects. So thank you for being part of Little Honolo. We really appreciate you.
Always my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye.